What's up, everybody? It's your boy Hawk, and welcome back to another episode of the Hawks Hoops podcast. Appreciate you for pulling up for another episode. I want to say we're like 3 or 4 episodes in a row, which, if you know me, it don't seem like a lot, but if you know me, that's a lot. um, Appreciate y'all for showing love to last week's episode. A couple of the clips, low-key did some great numbers for me, especially that Timberwolves one. Really enjoyed that conversation of talking about the Timberwolves. We're going to try to do something similar, doing a deep dive on two different teams this week. On the docket today, we're talking about the Atlanta Hawks and the Orlando Magic, what I'm deeming two sides of the same coin. We'll get into that in a little bit. We're about a month into the season, like a week and so, little over a week or so into the season. So I asked for some hot takes from y'all on socials. We have some interesting takes. Some are good. Some I'm like, what the heck is this? We'll get into those. Also, you guys also supplied with some questions. We're going to talk about in-season tournament. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into this today. First, I want to talk about the Orlando Magic, because the Orlando Magic are one of the teams who, going into this season, I thought they were going to be decent. Like, and not necessarily in the sense of even a playoff team, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. I thought they might be flirting with the play-in. I saw what they were building. They weren't necessarily a team that made any crazy off-season moves. They were just a team that was young and steadily getting better and better year over year. That's just the direction that they were looking at. So I'm like, okay, they're gonna be fighting for play-in. The Orlando Magic has started this season. They're currently 14-6. They're second in the East, and they look really, really good. I don't know how sustainable this is, to be completely honest with you. I'm not trying to rain on Orlando Magic's parade. There are some things that I think are sustainable, and we'll get into this. I don't know if they're going to remain like a top 4 seed throughout the rest of the season or anything like that. But right now, they look really, really good. And I think it's mainly because they have an identity, and that identity is we play amazing defense because we have size, versatility, length on the perimeter and in the paint. Like, just defensively, this team is built perfectly. And we'll get into that in a second. Right now, they're Orlando Magic. They're 18th in the league in offensive rating, so like a middle of the pack offense. But right now, they're third in defensive rating. For a while, they were first, second. They've been flirting around top three pretty much all season in terms of defensive rating. They have the sixth highest net rating in the league. So that middle of the pack ish offense and elite defense gets you a top 10 net rating in the league. And they're holding opponents to 110 points, which is sixth best in the league. And it goes further than there, because I was just amazed by how well they are playing defense. They're top 10 in opponents' second chance points, meaning you're not getting a lot of offensive rebounds and putbacks against this team. They're 11th in opponents' points in the paint. They're stopping teams from scoring in the paint, from getting to the paint. And a lot of it is because the off the defensive weapons that they have on the court. And it's a couple of guys I really want to shout out and show some love. As a unit, as a team, we'll talk about some of their scheme stuff in a second. They're playing really, really good defense as terms of just their defensive scheme. But there are a couple of really key pieces to this defensive scheme that I think make them just hard to score against. First, I want to show some love to Jalen Suggs. I think this guy honestly has potential to make an all-defensive team. Like, it might be a little early to be claiming that, but if he stays on this trajectory, I think that's the direction we can see him potentially going in, or at least get a nod or some consideration for all defensive team as the season continues on. He's proving that he'd be a great defender. Not all of his numbers necessarily lean towards this, but right now he is averaging 2 steals a game. It's funny. Uh, Steals aren't everything. Shout out to my boy B-Ball Takes, Smart B-Ball Takes on Twitter. I saw a tweet talking about the Atlanta Hawks and the amount of the people who are leading in steals. I don't want to say the Hawks. DeJounte Murray was high up on that list, and he just happened to say steals aren't everything. And the Hawks are like top 10 in steals right now. Or I think they're actually top 5 in steals as a team and have one of the worst defenses in the league. So yes, steals aren't everything, but Jalen Suggs is playing defense, and he happens to be averaging 2 steals a game right now. The thing that stands out to me about Jalen Suggs, and I didn't want to get too ahead of myself talking about the Hawks there, but the thing that stands out to me about Jalen Suggs specifically is his ability to play bigger than he is. He's great defense around the rim, around the perimeter, against other guards that try to even bigger wings. Like, he did it well in the Celtics game against Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, trying to bully him, getting him in the post, getting him closer to the basket. He does a really good job of getting the hand up, denying what are normally easy looks for some of these guys and making them work. Opponent shot 8% worse when he's the defender and from 2 this so far this season, and that's about 60% of the shots he's defends, which is telling me a lot of guards, a lot of wings try to bully him, get to the basket, get to their post game, get to the mid range, and he's doing a great job of defending that. The other piece to that is we talked about this last week. We're talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves, and you're going to hear me say this word a lot if I see a guy who does it, because it's one of the things that is so valuable when a team has a guy that can do this, and that's screen navigation. Jalen Suggs is another one of those guys who navigates screens very, very well. And he does it by staying close to the ball handler, staying close to the body of the ball handler, getting inside their, I guess I'll say their dribbling pocket, and staying high on the screen to make that screen almost negate it if the screener isn't setting good enough a screen. And if he does happen to get picked by the screen, he does a really good job of recovering, staying attached to the hip, and making that either mid-range pull up, or if they try to go all the way to the rim, we'll talk about some of their interior defense in a second, the Orlando Magic's interior defense. But Jalen Suggs does a great job of navigating those screens, blowing up those pick and rolls. And I know we talked about it last week when we were talking about Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards about their screen navigation with Timberwolves. And you might say, yo, Hulk, you sound like a broken record. We talked about screen navigation last week. The reason, to me at least, screen navigation is so important with the pick and roll and being so pick and roll, pick and pop, just screens in general, the Spain high pick and roll being such a go-to offense for every NBA team. Every NBA team runs, it feels like at least 20 pick and rolls a game. And that doesn't even feel like an exaggerated number. I haven't looked it up, but I feel like it's fair to say almost every team runs at least 20 pick and rolls a game throughout the course of a game. And with the rate that these guards are shooting nowadays, the rates that bigs can shoot nowadays, just how clean offenses are, if you don't have a guy who can navigate screens well as your point of attack defender, you're going to get killed in the pick and roll. And then from there, the rest of your offense is just, the rest of your defense is just playing catch up if you can't properly defend and pick and roll. And proper pick and roll defense, as hard as it is and as a luxury as of a commodity as it is, starts with a versatile defender who can navigate screens well, and that's Jalen Suggs, right? We'll talk about some of the rotations that happen in the pick and roll in a second. The other player that I want to shout out from the defensive side of the ball is Anthony Black. Y'all know me. I'm not a draft guy. I'm not a guy who watches a ton of college ball. I'm not a guy who does a ton of research, going into the draft. I've never completed a mock draft. I kind of absorb the information that's given to me. Like, I'll read articles, I'll watch other people's videos about the draft. And to an extent, I take a lot of people who I consider draft experts' word on it when it comes to what they think people are going to do coming into the draft. And so Anthony Black's, one of the things on his scouting report coming into the league was, this guy's a good defender. He's a 6'7" guard. He can use his length. He can use his size to play good perimeter defense. I didn't know that meant he was going to play great perimeter defense. Anthony Black this season, defensively, offensive players, when he's guarding him, are shooting 8% worse from the three-point line. When he's the one guarding the closest defender to them, he's surprisingly, because of the fact that he's 6'7", he has some length, good wingspan, he's a solid defender around the rim. Now, it's not a crazy volume, but if on a rotation he happens to be the guy who's the person defending the rim just because of how they rotate, and we'll talk about that in a second, it's not a free layup if Anthony Black's at the rim. Like, if you're a guard, even if you're a wing, it's not a free layup if Anthony Black is the defender at the rim. And the last player I want to shout out specifically I got two more players actually I want to shout out defensively on the defensive side of the ball. But one of them, what did we do wrong, Eagles? Once again, it's my fault, y'all. Y'all know I got the Eagles game up. We recorded this on Sundays, usually in the evenings, afternoons. Eagles are playing the 49ers tonight. We're down 14-6 right now. The other player I want to shout out and give some love to is Gogo Badazzi. He has stepped up a lot in the absence of Wendell Carter Jr. He's been playing fantastic defensively. Another guy who's you're going to see a trend with these players on the Magic. Players are shooting 11% worse within 6 feet when he's a defender. So he's being a great defender around the rim, causing players to miss easy layups that they would normally make. Just once again, leading to forcing players to miss. 11% worse from the rim when Gogo Badazzi's on the court. 8% worse from perimeter when being guarded by Anthony Black. 8% worse from 2 when being guarded by Jalen Suggs. And I already talked about the fact that they're 7th in opponent's second chance points. So they're making you miss. They're getting the defensive rebounds, not letting you get offensive rebounds. And they're just closing out defensive possessions by not allowing the offense to get second and third looks. It's really simple stuff in the grand scheme of things when you're talking about like what you want your defense to do. force misses, get the rebound, and not let the offense get offensive rebounds and second chance, third chance looks. But when you do all of those things, you end up with a top 3 defense in the NBA. Defensively as well, another guy I want to shout out is Jonathan Isaac. Now, Jonathan Isaac only plays you're going to only see him for 13, 15 minutes a game, right? But when you do see him, when he's on the floor, he's honestly probably their best defender on their team. He has the most versatility in my mind. He can legitimately switch out on the wings. He can guard bigs. By switch out on the wings, I mean like throw him on Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum might still get his, but he's going to make it difficult for him to get his. Like he's a guy you can throw on Giannis. He's a guy you can throw on Tatum. He's a guy you look up. He can be guarding Tobias Harris and playing help side defense on Joel Embiid. Like Jonathan Isaac is an excellent, excellent, excellent defender. And I want to really emphasize how great on defense he is and how valuable he is to their defense. The only reason he's not getting more than like 13, 15 minutes a game because on the offensive side of the ball, he's an absolute liability. At least when you watch the games, he just looks like he's spacing out at times on the offensive side of the ball. He's not necessarily he doesn't seem to have an offensive identity yet. You'll catch him. He might take 1 or 2 threes a game and it might just be a complete air ball. That's the next phase in his game to me. For Jonathan Isaac to get more minutes on the court, to get more time on the court, to be able to have an even bigger impact defensively just off the strength that he's there more, he has to play better on the offensive side of the ball for this Orlando Magic team. One of the things I want to talk about for the Magic is that I've showed some love to some specific players who really have been doing really a lot on the defensive side. Obviously, Franz Wagner's been great. Mo Wagner's been great in terms of just defending the rim and being a good defender there. Paolo Banchero's continued to be a big body in some two-way play. Franz Wagner is also a big body in some two-way play, but not Franz and Paolo's not necessarily there for the defensive side of the ball. I'm not calling them bad defenders, but that's not their main focus on this Orlando Magic team. Defensively, this team is a unit. One of the things that they do that I've noticed a lot is say the ball's on the right wing. Whoever's 2 passes away is almost always in help position. Maybe not fully in the paint, but has a foot in the paint. And give him some space to hit maybe his shooter that's in the corner, or maybe there's a shooter on the wing. Give him some space to him, and just always in the paint, crowd in the paint to make a drive not easy or just deter the offensive team altogether from trying to drive to the paint because the paint is so crowded with Orlando Magic defenders. But one of the things that is usually a counter to that is teams are not fast enough or not tall enough to, if a skip pass happens, really impact that 3-point shot on the other side of the court. What the Orlando Magic are able to do, because of the size, the length, the versatility, the athleticism even, as the ball swings back around the court, they communicate very well in the sense that whoever was on the help side, whoever was playing help side, they don't necessarily have to go back to their man. Sometimes they'll go back to whoever's the closest man to them as the ball is rotating back around the perimeter, and then somebody else will pick their man up. They communicate really, really well in terms of off-ball switching, something that I think a lot of teams struggle with. Almost every team in the league switches in the pick and roll and on screens and on off-ball screens. A lot of switching happens as players cross each other, I'll say. You don't see, or at least I don't see, a lot of switching happen off-ball when the offensive players aren't even necessarily moving, but the switch is happening because the defense is so active that as the ball moves around the court, as different sides become either weak side or help side, players know just where to go to make sure everything's covered. They'll leave they'll take the risk of leaving the 3-pass away guy open and rush to the 2-pass away guy, believing and trusting that someone else is going to pick up their man behind him as this ball continues to swing around the perimeter. One of the things I wrote down when I was watching one of the last Magic games I was watching was this defense breathes well, meaning just what I said. They rotate back out to the perimeter quickly and efficiently. They protect the paint. Like you can, as the ball is moving around the court, you can see the defense coming in and going out, coming in and going out, depending on who's help side and who's strong side. The Magic have an identity, and it's defense. And this defense is proving that if you have an elite defense and a middle of the pack solid offense, like this team scores as a unit. I want to say Paolo's at like 17 right now. I mean, 20 a game right now. Franz is at like 18, 19. And then you got a bunch of other guys, 14, 15, 16 points a game. Like they're scoring as a unit, they're scoring as a team, and they're defending as a team. And that's why you have the Magic as the second best team in the East right now. Talk about a team that has really great defense and some league average offense. I don't want to use the word mediocre. Now let's switch gears and talk about a team who I'm looking at it as the other side of the same coin. And not exactly the same coin, but a team who has some really, really good offense and some really bad defense, which gives them middle of the pack net rating, and they're not playing bad, but they're just not playing as good as the Orlando Magic. And that's the Orlando Hawks. Atlanta Hawks right now, they're 9-10, 10th in the Eastern Conference. They're 4-6 in their last 10. Surprisingly, though, I don't got a lot of bad things to say about the Hawks. I'm liking pieces of what I'm seeing so far, specifically from Trae Young. I want to really take this time to give some love to Trae Young. Over his last couple of games, he's actually been, honestly, the season in general. I think Trae Young gets a lot of. He's a polarizing player. I'll say that. His skill level and his numbers are actually usually really, really good. NBA Twitter just doesn't like him for some reason, or that's the sentiment I get a lot, that NBA Twitter doesn't like him. And part of that is because of his lack of defensive ability. But the offensive side of the ball from Trae Young is absolutely phenomenal. So this season, 27 points, 10 assists, 40% from the field, 35% from three. That's on the season. He had a really rough, slow start to the season, shooting the ball efficiency-wise. His numbers didn't look like himself. Over the last 10 games, though, 29 points, 11 assists, 45% from the field, 39% from three. And he's doing a lot of good things for this Atlanta Hawks offense. So outside of the shooting, and I think we all know Trae Young's a great shooter. Shooting is a really big piece of his game. The distance at what he's able to shoot to keep defenses honest, be able to start his pick and rolls super high because defenses has to be worried about his shot. But I think a couple of underrated pieces to his game. A lot of people talk about his shooting. A lot of people talk about his playmaking. His his in between game, to me, is really, really underrated. So a lot of times you'll get Trae Young, not talking about a shooting play, but he has a lot of patience on his drives. And what I mean by that is it could be either coming off of pick and roll or he just has this being beat, where he gets to around like the free throw line area. And in his last 10 games, for some context, he's been shooting actually really, really good from the mid-range, shooting 48% from mid. 40% of his shots are coming from the mid-range. And when he gets around that free throw line area, he has the ability to either, and this is all, the defenses are aware of this, and you can see the defense reacting to this as he's driving to the basket, because he has the ability to either hit his roll man, potentially usually Clint Capella and Nneka Okongwu, on a lob as they roll to the basket, knock down that midi either floater or pull up for a full jumper at that free throw line area and knock that down at almost 50% clip, or even has the ability to either hit the close corner, say if he's like maybe, driving to his left and hit the left-hand corner, maybe it's Bogdanovich over there in that corner, hit him, or say it's DeAndre Hunter on the other side of the court and on the weak side corner, has the ability to make that skip past him. So a lot of times you'll see Trae Young when he's driving to the basket to, I don't want to call it a hesitation dribble because it doesn't look like he's doing a full-on hesitation dribble, fully stopping, but you can tell he's being patient to let the defense react, to basically tell him how to exploit the defense. And a lot of times he's be able to use either his vision or a head fake, honestly very similar to a quarterback, like a good quarterback being able to use his vision, use a head fake to make the defense think he's going to throw to the corner, and make the defense think he's going to throw that lob to get himself wide open for a bucket or get that lob to Capella going. Just his ability to use his playmaking and his offense, his offensive scoring ability in tandem together to keep the defenses on the edge of their seat, it really makes him elite. Like, he uses his passing vision as a weapon to get himself open. a lot. It's hard to trap him on screens because of his passing ability. If the big comes and tries to force him high and trap him high on a pick and roll, he has the ability to squeeze that pass through the trap to get to Clint Capella or whoever the roll man is. And the NBA tried to do this a couple of years ago with how they try to take away some of the offensive players' ability to draw fouls in terms of offensive players leaning into the defense. Specifically, I'm thinking of Trae Young driving to the basket, getting past his man, and jumping back into the defender to draw that foul there. They took away that option for him. But what the defense can still do, and what the defense does at what Trae Young can still do, and what Trae Young does really well, is he still can, once he's at that free throw line, once he's driving to the basket and gets to that free throw line, gets to his spot there where we talked about it, all those options, whoever he beat is still trying to get back into play. And he's not necessarily throwing himself back into that defender, but he still does a really good job of drawing fouls and getting easy baskets, easy shots at the free throw line. We talked about his mid-range game in the pick and roll, ability to draw fouls on trailing defenders. And like I said, his last 10 games, he's been really, really efficient. 47% from mid, 40% of his shots are coming from the mid-range. 40% of his shots are also coming from the three-point line, and he's shooting almost 40% from three, with 30% of his shots coming at the rim, and he's shooting 60% from the rim. Trae Young, a lot of his game comes from like that midi floater, that midi pull, or at the three-point line. But when he does get to the rim, it's not a ton over these last couple of games. He's still very efficient at finishing around the rim and finishing around the basket as a smaller defender. Okay, no score there from the Eagles. Once again, sorry. Eagles almost scored. And y'all know me. We be watching the Eagles game while we make these. But Bogdanovic continues to be really, really good for them. 15 points on 38% from three, almost 8 threes a game. 8 attempts a game, I should say. He's just been a really good floor spacer for them. Not doing too much. Can put the ball on the floor a little bit for them. He's just been continued to be a solid addition to their team for the last couple of years he's been there. I think when he initially came to the Atlanta Hawks, I think there was this understanding and hope that he would maybe be more for them in the offensive side of the ball. It hasn't necessarily turned into that, but the 15 a game on really efficient shooting is, in my mind, been really solid for them, and I don't know how much more you could want for them from that. DeJounte Murray. Let's talk about him real quick. I was one of the people who was real prevalent and real vocal on, I don't know how well DeJounte Murray and Trae Young are going to work out. Historically in his career, DeJounte Murray has not been a great catch and shoot three guy, even a great 3-point shooter in general throughout most of his career. But DeJounte Murray this season has continued to be a good defender. Tush push for the touchdown. Did we get the tush push for the touchdown? I think they actually stopped their tush push. Anyway, sorry. We tried to get a tush push for the touchdown. DeJounte Murray this season, 20 points a game, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 45% from the field, 39% from three on 6 attempts. Both the attempts and the percentage are career highs for him from three. And it just goes to show that he's continued to work on his game, continued to work on his 3-point shot. But it's still not where I think the Hawks want it because it's still not consistent. Yes, I did just say 39% from three on 6 attempts. But over the last 10 or so games, he's just up or down in terms of the 3-point shooting. And that's how you got up at the 39%. He's been 1 for 4, then 0 for 3, but then he'll do 3 for 7, 4 for 6. But then now it's 3 for 8, 1 for 6, 0 for 6, and then 3 for 7, 2 for 4, 4 for 6. So he has like 3-4 games in a row where he's shooting like 25% from three. And then the next couple of games where he's plus 50% from three. So yeah, technically for the season, he's averaging almost 40%, but the consistency's not there. And he's not shooting at what feels like a consistent 40% clip. It's either he's 60% from three or he's 6% from three. And then he ends up in the middle at 40. So I just hope as the season continues on, and I think, honestly, it might be a while. It might be a long season for him when it comes to shooting. And if you just look at whatever he's averaging, you might be like, oh, okay, that's solid. Why doesn't it look like this team's playing better? It's because you'll have 3-4 games in a row where he's not shooting good from three. And then you'll have a couple of games where he's absolutely unconscious. I think it'd be better for him and the Hawks in the long run if he was just more consistent. And I think that's still something he's growing through. because most of his career with the Spurs, he was not a 3-point shooter at all, let alone a good one. He just didn't attempt them. News came out the other day that Jalen Johnson is going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. Um, I was. It's a big impact on the Hawks. Jalen Johnson's been really, really good for them defensively. He's added a lot of versatility for them. He's stepped up and taken over the starting spot for John Collins. He's filled that John Collins role for them in the starting lineup. He's had the ability to guard guys like, Giannis. He like Giannis, Tatum, Evan Mobley. Like has some of that defensive versatility to guard either bigger wings, faster bigs. He just has some of that versatility that they don't have. However, even with him on the court, even with his defensive impact and defensive versatility, they've been a bottom 10 defense all season long. So part of it, me, was like, well, how much difference is it going to make if Jalen Johnson is or is not on the court and to their defense? Because he's just not been a good defender anyway. So they tried to run, since he's been out, they've run Saddiq Bey in the lineup. And Saddiq Bey ain't bad, but it really does show that, okay, y'all were missing the versatility from Jalen Johnson, because Saddiq doesn't have the foot speed to guard some of the guards that Jalen Johnson was guarding. They're playing around with the idea of potentially starting Onyeka Okongwu and Clint Capella in the starting lineup together. Historically, the Hawks don't like those lineups and haven't run a ton of that. They like the bench spark that Okongwu brings off the bench. I think the Hawks they don't have good defensive pieces, if that makes sense. They give up the 4th most points in the league in the paint. They're bottom 10 in opponents' points off turnovers. Like, opponents are scoring off of turnovers on them. They're bottom 10 in blocks. They're not crazy rim protectors. They're not stopping people from scoring in the paint. And part of that is, I think, Clint Capella is not the rim protector he once was 3, 4, 5 years ago. And the perimeter defense isn't helping him by stopping guys from getting to the paint. We know Trae Young's not an amazing defender. Bogdanovich isn't an amazing defender. Now Saddiq Bey, depending on who he's guarding, not necessarily an amazing defender on the perimeter. Yes, you have DeJounte Murray out there who can be the point of attack guy, but backdoor cuts are a thing. If DeJounte Murray's just not guarding the guy who's attacking the basket at the time, the Hawks aren't good defensively. But the offensive side of the ball, Trae Young, offensive machine. And I think that's mainly what I wanted to touch on and just really show some love to Trae Young, because going into this season, I was one of the people. There were 2 teams that were early on I want to watch these teams because I don't believe in them. Last week, and those 2 teams were the Minnesota Timberwolves, who we talked in depth, and they're really looking good last week. And the other team was the Atlanta Hawks, partially because I didn't know how I felt about the 2 guard lineup with Trae and Murray. We talked about that earlier. And then just the rest of the team in general, I didn't have a lot of love or faith in their defense, which is still apparent. But the offense that this team's run, because of the engine that Trae Young is absolutely fantastic. And I wanted to emphasize Trae Young in this, because I think a lot of times we just think Trae Young's out there shooting the ball, because admittedly, not a ton of people watching Atlanta Hawks games. You wouldn't think of them as exciting to watch. But if you watch an Atlanta Hawks game, next time you don't know what game to watch, you flipping through the channels, you might have League Pass or streaming, however you stream the games. Turn on a Hawks game. Watch Trae Young look like one of the best offensive players in this league, because he is. Earlier this week, I put on socials asking for some hot takes or questions about a month into the season. I do it every week, asking about topics or questions you want me to discuss on the pod. But specifically, I was like, all right, we're a month in. Any specific questions or hot takes that you guys have? So let's go through a couple of those. First one we're going to do was this is off of Instagram. The Freddy213 asks, who is your top 3 most improved players so far? This was an interesting one for me. The first person that immediately comes to mind, obviously, is Tyrese Maxey. Stepping up huge after the James Harden trade. Without James Harden, he's looked phenomenal this season. And to compare some numbers, last year, 20 points a game, off 43% from the 3, 48% from the field. This year, that's jumped up to 27 points, almost 7 assists, 39% from 3. The main difference I'm seeing from Tyrese, and the main impact we're seeing from Tyrese, is just he looks like a star on this team now. I think in previous years, last year particularly, he looked good at times. He looked really, really good at times, but he looked like a role player playing his role and trying to get in where he fits in. Now it's clear that he is the number two option after Joel Embiid. He's playing like he's the number two option after Joel Embiid. When Joel's not on the court and it's time for Tyrese to take over and be himself, he's doing that. The next guy on this list I have is, I think, another person that most people would expect on a most improved player list, potentially, I guess, and that's Scotty Barnes. Now, his jump isn't crazy, 15 a game last year to 19 a game this year, but the biggest impact I'm seeing from Scotty this season is his ability to shoot the three ball. 28% from three last year, 38% from three this year, and he just looks like a leader on this team. It looks like the offense is running through Scotty Barnes more, which is allowing him to do more on the offensive side of the ball, to be more aggressive. The ability to shoot is allowing him to get to the basket easier now because defenses have to respect his jump shot. And the last guy, my most improved, I don't think this guy will actually get it, nor do I think this guy will even really be in the running for it. But every time I watch this team, I'm like, yo, he has been a really, really good for them. And he's playing some of the best basketball I've seen him play in a long time. And that's Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson for the Denver Nuggets last year, between this time with the Clippers and the Nuggets, 10 points, 41% from the field, 33% from three. This year, only 13 points, 50% from the field, 40% from three. And so, yeah, the numbers aren't a crazy jump. The percentages jump up, but what I'm seeing the most from him is really, really solid backup point guard play. When Jamal Murray's not on the floor, they slide in Reggie Jackson, and he does a good job of not doing too much, not necessarily disrupting the offense. He's been solid in catch and shoot scenarios. He's been solid when he catches the ball and can put the ball on the ground a little bit, create for others. We looked at his classic game with DeAndre Jordan against the Clippers last week. We broke that down on the channel. And he's stepped up a lot in the absence of Jamal Murray. When they spent this about week and a half without Jamal Murray, he's been good sliding into that starting role for them. Shout out to Reggie Jackson. I wanted to show him some love. Do I think he'll actually get the most improved player award? No. Did I think he was deserving of some love? Absolutely. Next up, we got a question from my boy Matt on Twitter at AKA Hilton asks, Next up, we got a question from my boy Matt on Twitter at AKA Hilton. I've seen more positive fan reactions to Max Strus in Cleveland versus Miami. Do you think he's playing different, made changes, or is it just the culture? Personally, I like Strus a lot. Love to hear your thoughts. That's an interesting one. I don't know if I've seen a fan reaction in a more positive way for his Cleveland time versus his Miami time. But if you are seeing it, it makes sense to me, mainly because in his time in Miami, I think this main thing, I don't think Strus is doing anything different. I think he's just being more consistent. I think part of that consistency comes from, and this is not a knock to Miami, this is just a part of how they play and how they run their organization. Miami has a very much, at least last year, especially dealing with the injury of Tyler Hero, had very much a next man up mentality, had a we're going to ride the hot hand mentality. So between Strus, Vincent, Duncan Robinson to an extent being in and out of the lineup, Strus would have times, Max Strus would have times, if you look back at his game log for Miami last season, where it'd be one game he's got 7 minutes, one game he has 32 minutes, the next game after that he has 18 minutes, then he's back to 12 minutes, now he's playing 28 minutes. So, and it wasn't necessarily, if you look at it, it might not necessarily be because he was playing bad, just maybe Gabe Vincent was going crazy and Spoelstra's like, yo, we're riding him tonight. And I think part of that leads into some up and down play within a player if you don't necessarily know exactly how, not exactly, but if you don't know you're going to consistently get the same amount of minutes on a night-to-night basis. So far in the first 20 games in Cleveland, his minutes and his play time and his role has been consistent, mainly because to me, the Cleveland Cavaliers need his floor spacing on the court. They need his shooting on the court to space the floor for Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. They need what he brings. So he's playing more on a consistent basis. Is he playing better? I don't know if I'd necessarily say he's playing better or worse. He's playing better than he was in the playoffs. I think Max Strus in the playoffs, outside of I think it was the one round against the Knicks, if I'm remembering correctly, he wasn't fantastic. So he's playing better than he was towards the end of the season with his time with the Heat. And that could just be new city, but I think it's more so just they're using him more consistently, and he just has a more consistently defined role with this Cleveland Cavaliers team. Great question, though. Another one we have from Instagram here, Carter Goodwin 11. If the Mavs stay healthy, they can go deep in the playoffs. I like this one a lot as a hot take, mainly because I I haven't had a chance to really talk about the Mavs on either a TikTok video, a regular video, or on the pod. But every time I watch the Mavs, I love what I'm seeing. Lucas obviously still looks fantastic. Kyrie, though, for me, has been like the secret sauce to this team, as weird as that sounds. Luka's going to be Luka. We know what Luka's going to bring. And part of what we've said for a while for Luka is he needs a running mate. He needs a number two. Kyrie has, at least so far early in the season, has filled that slot perfectly to me. They're doing a lot of similar stuff that people have been talking about the last couple of weeks that the Phoenix Suns are doing. Wherein when, for example, the Phoenix Suns, if Devin Booker or Kevin Durant are in a pick and roll situation, the person who's one pass away is the opposite of, like, if Kevin Durant's in a pick and roll with Yusuf Nurkic, one pass away is Devin Booker, so you can't help off, and vice versa. The Dallas Mavericks are doing something very similar, where if Luka's in a pick and roll situation with Derek Lively, or Kyrie's in a pick and roll situation with Derek Lively, it's Luka or Kyrie, one pass away. Kyrie's been excellent in catch and shoot situations. He's been just really, really good, and I think showing off a lot of playmaking aspects of his game that I don't want to say I forgot about per se, but I just feel like his pieces of his game I don't get to see that much. And a lot of times when Luka's not on the floor, whether not necessarily just because of the rotation and Kyrie's on the floor by himself, he's looked really good in playmaking roles and in the pick and roll with Derek Lively. So I like this take. I do. If they can stay healthy, I don't know how deep the playoff run's going to be, but we've seen Luka make pretty deep runs with almost just himself. Grant Williams started out the season really, really good. This last about 6-7 games, he's not been as good as he was in the first 10. But other than that, if he can get back to how he was the first 7 to 10 games of this season, I would love that for the Mavericks. He was putting the ball on the floor. He was knocking down open shots. I just think they need to continue on that trend. Jalen Hurts took a big shot there. Oh, that's a big hit. Okay, and they're replaying it a lot. Is he injured and I missed it? Sorry. Oh, okay, he's going in the fourth quarter and he's jogging off the field, it looks like. Oh boy. Um so yes, I like this take. Can they make a deep playoff run if everyone's healthy? Yes. Yes, I think they can. Now we have some takes from Discord. Join the Discord. Let's Talk Hoops. Link should be in the bio. Shameless plug. Willie Bag 40 says Warriors won't be a top 5 team in the West. That's not hot to me. I'm not even gonna lie to you. That's not hot at all to me. I agree. Warriors probably won't be a top 5 team in the West. Not saying they'll be bad. Just top 5 is going to be tough for a team that's not clicking yet. For a team that doesn't look like they're clicking on all cylinders, and I think the Western Conference is really deep, it's going to be tough for a team who is not doing bad, but a team that is not clicking early to make up some wins as the season continues on. For example, in reference, right now the Warriors are 9-11. They're 11th in the Western Conference, and the West is just really, really deep this year. The NBA in general is just really, really deep, and I think losing a lot of games early or losing more games than I think you should early are going to really hinder you in the long run when it comes to playoff seeding. He continues on to say Shea is going to be top 3 in MVP voting. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is having a really, really good season, like really, really good season, and the Thunder are number 2 in the West right now. I don't know if he's going to finish in top 3. That's just going to be tough because honestly, when you say top 3 in voting, the last couple of seasons it's been the same 3 guys: Embiid, Joel, Jokic, and Giannis. And I think we're going to get a mix of those 3 again in top 3 for voting. Anthony Edwards leads the league in scoring, and the Timberwolves win the in-season tournament. We'll talk more about the in-season tournament later. We're going to close out the show with my thoughts on the in-season tournament so far as it's been going, and if I have a prediction for who wins. I don't think Anthony Edwards is going to lead the league in scoring, as trivial as it sounds, and I know people are going to hate me when I say this. He doesn't get to the line enough, and I think to lead the league in scoring, you need to shoot at least, I'm going to say, like 8 free throws a game to truly lead the league in scoring. And I think he's at like 6-7 a game right now. And it's not that big of a difference, but also just the way his team is constructed with a guy like Karl-Anthony Towns playing as good as he is. Anthony Edwards doesn't need to average 30 a game for the Timberwolves to be really, really successful. And to lead the league in scoring in today's NBA, you need to be like 31, 32 a game. He also continues on with Emmanuel quickly will be a borderline all-star. I don't think he'll be a borderline all-star. I just think he'll be a guy that's really, really good that people show love to. I don't think he'll be a borderline all-star, though. Continuing on with Discord, comedian says, I don't know if this is a hot take, but I think Jason Tatum wins MVP this season. The Celtics have been rolling, and I really, really like the Celtics. That's not a bad take. I like Jason Tatum's odds to be MVP more than like Shea's odds to be MVP. I don't mind that take at all. Low tier God says Russell Westbrook is one of the league's best defenders when it matters. I'll be honest, I don't really know what that means. I don't know if you're meaning like in the clutch or down the stretch. I think Russ has the physical facility to be a really, really good defender. But he's not always a great defender, at least in my time. I'm laughing because the 49ers just scored on my Eagles again, and it's now 35-15. Oh boy. Last couple ones from Discord. Suna.jpg says Clippers can make it to the Western Conference Finals. We talked about the Clippers in length last week when we did a breakdown of some footage. I think the Clippers on paper could be a really, really good team. They have a lot to figure out, though, defensively and offensively. Like both sides of the ball, they have a lot to figure out in terms of their rotations, how they're going to defend certain looks. Their pick and roll defense is atrocious. They went on a little bit of winning streak and started winning some games when Russell Westbrook went to the bench. I need more time to say they can make it to the Western Conference Finals. Right now, I'm saying no, though. Back to Instagram, my guy OK Waffles says Harden leaving the Sixers made them better. I want to give a shout out to Pierre from the Heliocentric podcast. He has this theory. He calls it the less is more theory, and talking about sometimes removing pieces from a team make them better. Just, the addition by subtraction, the age old tale. And I agree. Harden on this team, the Sixers team, wasn't bad. I'll say that. I don't want to seem like Harden was terrible for the Sixers last season and a half that he was here. He was good. James Harden Joel Embiid won an MVP, and James Harden led the league in assists. I'm not going to say that James Harden was bad on the Sixers or the Sixers were bad with James Harden. I think this version of the Sixers look better, and it's not solely just because James Harden isn't there. It's also the addition of Nick Nurse as a new head coach, implementing some new ball movement schemes, freeing Maxey to be more and to do more offensively. So yes, I agree with the take that this team does look better without James Harden, but it's not as simple as just we removed James Harden and now this team is better. There's more that's going into it. The role we have, also honestly a part of that trade, Robert Covington and Nicholas Batum, especially Nicholas Batum, has been absolutely fantastic for the Sixers, being that connector piece and showing off a little bit of playmaking, making that extra pass to get guys easy looks. He's really surprised me with that aspect of his game. But yes, Kev, I agree with your take here. The last question and topic that I got for the pod today is Freddie 213, once again on Instagram, asks, who you got winning the tournament? And so I just want to take a second to talk about the in-season tournament. We just finished the group play games a little bit ago. We're starting up the knockout round quarterfinal start this week. First game's Monday, 7:30, the Pacers and Celtics play, followed by the Kings and Pelicans. And then Tuesday, the Bucks Knicks versus the Lakers and Suns. Let me say first off, I thought that in-season tournament so far has been pretty solid. I'll admit I didn't necessarily go out of my way to keep in track with all the different possibilities that went down the last night of group play, that Friday night, where it was, if this team wins and wins by this amount of points, they can make it. But if this team loses, but that team doesn't get this amount of points, like there were a lot of different scenarios that were going on. So I'll be honest, I didn't keep up with all the scenarios, but I enjoyed watching the basketball still that came from it. I liked the courts. I like the idea of all the courts. I talked about in depth that I didn't love all the courts, like the gray ones. I'm still stuck on. I didn't love the look of most of the courts that just had a lot of gray. I like the courts that implemented colors. Even if I didn't love the colors, I just liked that they went for something different outside of gray. There were just way too many gray courts, in my opinion. On the same track of courts, my Sixers were eliminated from the knockout rounds. We went 2-2 in the group games. Nick Nurse, I couldn't tell if he was serious or not. I watched it, the interview, and he was basically like, he blames our subpar play on the courts themselves. I saw some other reports around the league that some of the guys felt that the courts were a little bit more slippery and didn't necessarily love the change of the courts from a player and coach's perspective. Just because new courts mean it's not as much grip as they're used to. The courts aren't worn in and like game ready. They had a different feel to them, is what a lot of reports were saying. From a fan's standpoint, I like the look of the courts. If they can somehow mesh the idea of getting the courts more worn in to feel similar to the courts that players play on a regular basis, and still add that addition of something different, I think that's the best of both worlds. If not, we'll see what they do next year with the courts. First year, wanted to try something different. I thought it was a good look. We talked about previously that Adam Silver said they went with a full color court because they wanted to grab people's attention as they're flipping through the channels and go, whoa, this is basketball, but these courts are different. Something's different. What is going on here, to get people's attention, which I thought was a good look. The games themselves and some of the rule implementations that were different, mainly the point differential aspect of it, I thought for the most part was pretty good. I think that there were a couple of conversations that people had when DeMar DeRozan got ejected in that game about 2 weeks ago, where he was like, yo, y'all talking about it was against the Raptors. And he was mad that I think Pascal Siakam shot that 3 down the stretch at the end of that game. And it was ironic because Jason Tatum spoke on that maybe like 5-6 days later, saying, yeah, like the NCAA tournament is cool, but I don't like this point differential thing. It's not respecting the game. And then I want to say like 2 nights later, the Boston Celtics were running up the score and trying to score at the last second to get their point differential up. Like when it came time for him and his team to do it, they were all about running up the score. So I like that aspect of it. I think the unwritten rule of like, yo, just dribble out the shot clock at the end. If you're gonna be mad that they try scoring you at the end, even though they've been whooping you by like 20 all game, like you should have been mad they was whooping you by 20 all game, not mad that they continued to score with like 15 seconds left on the clock. That's my take on it. Maybe one day we'll do a more in-depth look at some of the unspoken rules in basketball that I think are honestly just stupid. And that's one of them. In terms of who do I think will win the knockout rounds? So we looked at the matchups. I think the Bucks will win their game over the Knicks. I think the Celtics can win their game over the Pacers. And then I think that semifinal of Bucks Pacers is going to be really, really good. A single elimination game between the Bucks and the Celtics has the potential to be fantastic. Suns and Lakers, honestly, I'm split on. The Lakers have looked great in these. They went 4-0 in the group games for the in-season tournament. The Suns, if healthy, like if Devin Booker and Kevin Durant are playing, I'm picking the Suns. If only one of them are playing, the game can go either way in my mind. I'm picking the Kings to beat the Pelicans. And honestly, my pick to win the championship, who I want to win the championship, I would love for the Kings to win. My pick is for the Kings to win. I think this is an opportunity for them to show, because especially whoever comes out of the Eastern Conference, and honestly, whoever comes out of the quarterfinals matchup in the West, like these are all good teams. Like these are all teams that are fighting for a playoff spot or are already basically going to be solidified to be a playoff team. These are all really, really good teams. And I think the Kings have a chance. I would love to see the Kings win. And my logic for why I would say the Kings have a chance is we know De'Aaron Fox is a great and clutch moments and is a great closer out to games. I think a lot of these in-season tournament games are going to be very close. I think teams are going to show up ready to play. So I think it's going to be close games throughout the game. You get to that fourth quarter, you let De'Aaron Fox go to work, clutch player of the year last year. That's why I'm banking on the Kings to win the tournament. But overall, I think it was really good. I'm curious to see what the numbers are going to be in terms of the ratings, how the NBA looks at it as a success or not a success. But the first stage, the group play games, to me, were entertaining. They were fun. I liked the fact that on a Friday night or on a Tuesday night, there were like 10 games on. And I'm like, yo, it was a little overwhelming at first. I'm trying to flip back and forth and watch everything, but I enjoyed having a lot of basketball to watch. So we got the in-season tournament. We'll see how the rest of these games go. We'll see how exciting and how much energy is brought out in these games. But that's all we got for today, guys. If you enjoyed the podcast, I really do appreciate you for making it this far. You are a real one. If you enjoyed, feel free to leave a like, comment. I don't really know what I will tell you to comment here. I was about to try to throw in some like engagement stuff. Comment me a question if you have a question about it. But if you made it this far, you already a real one, and I appreciate you for watching. And I'll see you next Monday. I'm out. Peace.